There we go. We're live now. All right. Sorry, everybody. No intro. Nothing. I welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. But we're talking sci-fi TV and more. John Suntress here. Always happy to welcome my guy, Robert Meyer Burnett. Great to see you, Rob.
It's good to be back. It's been a while. I mean, you and I have been podcasting for like years now.
Rob, and also with San Diego coming this week.
Yeah.
I want to point out that, and I don't know if you remember, the first time we met was face to face in San Diego.
Yes, I do remember that. Like a long time ago.
Like 7 years ago, I want to say, like 2015. You guys weren't doing the SmackDown, the Starship SmackDown. You were doing, I think you guys were doing the 1982 Best Year of Movies, and that's great because I know Altman is making his documentary, isn't he? Of the best of
they're
1982?
debuting footage on at Comic-Con this week. They're doing it on Thursday. They're showing
Excellent.
the first. Yeah, so that's really cool. Very exciting.
That's great, man. Now you're doing the Starship SmackDown on. Is that on Sunday?
Yes, it's our 20th anniversary. We started doing the Star. I mean, we missed. I mean, obviously we missed COVID, but
Sure.
you know, it's the 20. I mean, if you told me that I would be doing Starship SmackDown, a panel that started out as a joke, and that we would be doing it 20 years later, I would have said, "Come on, really?"
That's the beauty of Comic-Con, man. I mean, truly. I mean, you get all the classic publishers and studios and everything else, but I'm really glad that they still have room for organic panels like that. But also, one of my favorite things to do at San Diego. I'm not going this year, unfortunately.
Oh,
but I know, man. I'll come back. I swear. Really expensive summer camp when you live as far away from San Diego as I do, man.
Exactly what it is.
I can't take the 2-hour train ride like you LA people,
Yeah, for sure.
So is that what you're doing? Is that how you're getting down there?
No, because I moved about an hour east of where I was at. So it's harder for me. Just it's almost easier. I mean, what's great about taking the train is you don't have to park.
Right.
The drive would be about 90 miles for me to go to make the drive to take the train.
I'm hip.
So it's actually closer for me to go to San Diego from where I'm at right now than it is to go into LA and then go to San Diego.
Do you know all the great, places, and I don't want you to divulge as far as parking where it's advantageous? I imagine Petco parking is likely used during San Diego and stuff.
Yeah, right? No, they definitely do. I mean, I have a certain hotel that some friends always stay at, so I just say I'm in their room.
Beautiful. Attaboy.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, you got it. No, man, you need your tricks. 2010, Jonathan Hickman, Brian Bendis, and Stuart and Catherine Immerman are like, hey, if you're going to San Diego, we'd love for you to, moderate our panels. And I'm like, and it's like June, and I'm like, I guess I'm going to San Diego.
Right.
So I bought a plane ticket, and I stayed in I forget which town. Is it Chula Vista where all the military bases are?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm staying at Chula Vista, which is, like 15 minutes from the convention center via expressways, highways.
Yes.
So, and that was fine. But in the grimiest, like Motel 6, completely gross. I'm wearing mittens. I'm wearing socks.
Oh yeah.
Head to toe, man. I had a hoodie on. I'm like, all right, I don't want anything touching these things. Whatever. And the best was I'd go, there was an AM PM down the street and a Jack in the Box. And I'm literally in line at Jack in the Box, and not to profile people, but I am certain there were prostitutes in line with me getting food.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure, and that's one thing about Comic-Con that people don't tell you. There's many ladies of the evening around, if that's your thing.
Yes, that is so funny, man. Well, that's a feeding frenzy for them. God bless them.
Oh yeah.
God bless the sex workers. Yes, we're all for it.
I have no problem with that. I mean, God knows I've met many a fan who needs a little bit of sex work in their life.
Amen.
But
you ever go to Dragon Con? Speaking of sex,
speaking of sex work, I was a guest of honor at Dragon Con like 20 years ago, and it was interesting. I mean, there has always been the alternative lifestyle element of fandom. Like I remember the very first time I ever really came into contact with that was when we were waiting in line I want to say we were waiting in line in high school to see the Star Wars. They were showing the Star Wars trilogy in 9 theaters across North America for the very first time. It was in 1985. And we're waiting in line. My friend Greg Smith and I had staked out. We were first in line, and my friends were coming in, and I met a woman who worked for the or she was in the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronisms. And she had a thing for my friend Mike, and her name was Belladonna Nightshade. And she was like, "Why don't you come to my house?" It's just like, and look, I have to say that my convention going experiences throughout the years have always been fun. Let's put it that way. And yeah, it's always been kind of a thing about, which is good, you know. It's different. I mean, things are different now. It's just in general. I don't know if they're better or not, but now, you know, people used to go to conventions. Now everybody's connected via the internet, social media. So everybody's already connected. So when you go to conventions, whatever you're going to do there is it's like already set up. But when I was growing up, you'd go to conventions for adventure, if that makes any sense.
No, I get it.
You know,
absolutely, man. Adventures of all kinds. I love when Doug Benson, the comedian, was doing his videos of him being stoned at Comic-Con and stuff. And I even remember one year just being on the street and stuff and seeing him walk around with his camera set up and stuff, and him just, you know, kind of touching hands in the crowd and everything. It was pretty great. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting too. When I started going to conventions when I was a kid, they were not, especially science fiction conventions, they were still very literary focused.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, people looked down on the media aspects of the convention. Like there was one, I grew up in Seattle, and there was NorwestCon, which was, it was very much literary minded, and there was stuff like Filk singing still went on.
Oh yeah.
And you know, there was a media component to it, but fans were very precious about the fact that, oh, we don't want these interlopers, because there hadn't been, in terms of great science fiction films, there had been 2001 and Planet of the Apes and Forbidden Planet and Day the Earth Stood Still and Solaris. Yeah, maybe Logan's Run, which was okay because it was based on a novel, you know. And it was and George Clayton Johnson,
George Clayton Johnson, absolutely.
But William F. Nolan, as a matter of fact, it's funny you say that, because weirdly enough, the sequel to Logan's Run,
never read it. Wow.
There's a sequel that William F. Nolan wrote. And
outstanding.
And this book came out in 1977. This is the copy that I bought.
I'm sure.
In Hawaii. I was on vacation in Hawaii with my parents. My parents took me to Hawaii. I was probably still 9 years old. And I bought this, and this was one of 2 sequels he wrote. He wrote Logan's World and Logan's Search.
Interesting.
And it's funny. This is the actual book, so it's in pretty good shape for being.
Looks great.
You know, for 1977.
Hell yeah.
It's funny because I've been rearranging my paperback books. I mean, it's such a weird thing when you move. I mean, hopefully this is the last place I'll ever live. I'll probably be buried here, thank God. But you know, moving around all this stuff, you have I've got thousands of movies and thousands of books, and I alphabetize them all, and it's such a daunting. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and you know, I like doing it, and when it's done, you know, putting stuff on shelves and stuff, and it's, you know, I used to do it when people would come over, you know, they'd come in and go, "Oh, you've got this," or nobody ever comes over anymore. No one gives it. No one cares. And so I kind of just do it for myself. And it's kind of a weird, it's just a weird, collecting is so weird, because even that, everything has gone mainstream, you know, so there's nothing, unless you're a high end, like prop collector, or you're collecting really high end collectibles, like a $20,000 Robbie the Robot. All you're doing now everybody's got, you know, hot toys and model kits and whatever.
Yeah.
What your collection's all about now is, I think, what makes it interesting is just this mix of stuff, this random mix. Like, I love my friend Justin in Australia. he's got like every hot toy and 6 scale figure made. He's got these incredible displays. I will like never, like I used to be the one guy that I had more action figures than other people, but that was just in my circle of friends. Now you go online and there's people that have way more things than me. So I can't even compete on that level. So all I can do is just have just a bunch of random stuff. That's like, oh, you know, and nobody cares, because it's really, I've now gotten to the point in my life where I'm too old now to want to collect. I mean, my problem is I can't get over the fact I'm still 12 years old inside.
Please, why are we talking?
Yeah, yes, so I'm like, oh, I got to get that model, or I got to get that omnibus, or I got to get this. But when I was collecting stuff to fuel my interests to hopefully make it in the film business, but now I'm jaded and disillusioned. No, I'm kidding. I'm not really. I mean, I'm still having a lot more fun than most people, because to me, it's all like, you know, when you watch the photographs that come back from the James Webb telescope, and you realize just how insignificant
amazing.
The universe. The funny thing about a lot of the discourse in the modern age that I have a problem with is that it's so insignificant when you start comparing. I mean, I've always said that every human being, the fact that each human being is unique, and it's amazing on a cosmic level. It's amazing, and we should all be walking around the planet looking at each other and going, "You're amazing." Because there's only one of you in the entire infinitude of the universe. And if we actually had any kind of comprehension as a species, how big the universe is, I think we would treat each other much better than we do. And now the petty differences that we are, and the yelling and screaming at each other over stupid things. And at some point it's like, come on, man. I mean, aren't we better than this?
Clutto would get back on the ship and go, yeah, never mind. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry I bothered you guys. You know, me and Gort got to get out of here, man.
Yeah, we're done. We're out.
What are you gonna do? No, I hear you, man.
But on the other hand, though, you know, if as a fan, as a lifelong fan that's watched this, I was explaining to somebody the other day, I first moved to LA in 1988, and I went that summer. I'd always wanted to go to Comic-Con. I drove by myself because I didn't really know anybody in LA yet. I drove to San Diego, and I went to my first San Diego Comic-Con, and it was it was at a hotel in downtown San Diego, and the dealer's room was a bunch of old dudes rifling through long boxes, you know. Sure. And they're like, we're no girls there.
Right.
And it's funny because nowadays, when you try and explain that to people, like there's a delightful woman that I used to stream with on Collider Heroes named Amy Dallin, who I just adored.
Sure, I know Amy.
She very, very smart, and she worked in a comic book store, and she had great taste in comics. I mean, I'm sure she still does. And some of my humor didn't sit well with her, but I haven't talked to her in a while. But since John Schnepp passed away, but I really liked her. But we would get in these conversations, and I would try and explain to her how fandom was different. She'd be like, "But women always went to conventions." And I said, "No, they did. They really did. It depended on which kinds of conventions you went to, though. There was not a big contingent of women that were rifling through long boxes for classic comic books. I mean, there just weren't. And I wasn't saying that women couldn't be fans of comics, but in my experience, going to conventions, which I've been going to since I was 5 years old, very few women went. They went to science fiction conventions, literary-minded conventions, but not comic conventions. And it's been really fun to sort of watch. I mean, my first Comic-Con, you know, my big purchase in 1988 was I bought the Japanese Laserdisc of Akira, because no one had seen Akira. It hadn't come to America yet. I'm like, oh my God. And when I was going to USC, my roommate and I found some Japanese exchange student. We didn't kidnap him, but we're like, hey, come to our house. And we made him, this poor Japanese kid, we made him, you know, sit at our house, and we go like every 5 minutes, okay, translate what just happened. You know, and it got to the end, like the last 30 minutes of the movie, and we're like, what just happened? And he's like, I don't know. You know, he tried to explain it. It was so funny. But nowadays, and watching how Comic-Con changed, and it really, like in the 90s, with the influx of anime and with video games and women becoming gamers, and when things like Emily the Strange or Neil Gaiman's Death, the offshoot of the Sandman,
absolutely,
and things like Hot Topic, you know, it really started to change the landscape of fandom, especially at Comic-Con. And now
totally.
it's 50-50, it's multiple generations of families, and because we've all become, back in the day, even in 1988, geeks were still, it's all gone mainstream, all of it.
Oh, God,
Which is great. I mean, because we all grew up with it, and now there's no such thing. It's funny. We used to watch, like, I didn't like Big Bang Theory, but I'm watching this and I'm like, it's such. Even then, it was an antiquated look at stereotypes of nerds, and I'm like, these are like stereotypes from like the 80s. And I understand there were people that were like that, but you know, I was showing somebody Sci-Fi Universe magazine, you know, that Chris Gorn Altman started, that I was the critic at large for. My sister sent me a bunch of old copies, and we even said, it doesn't say it on this cover, but we called it, oh, it does. This was the magazine for sci-fi fans with a life, because of the Shatner Saturday Night Live thing. You'd never get away with that now. You'd be called like I always get called. You're a gatekeeper, and I'm like, I can't prevent you from, nor would I try and prevent you from liking something. It's so weird because, you know, the fandom is for everyone. You know, it's just not for anybody to say who can and can't be a fan. And I think people have mistaken criticism for gatekeeping, and that bothers me.
I'm with you, man. No, I really think, and man, all right, here I am at the porch, you know, yelling at clouds like Abe Simpson. But no, I really do think it's a young person's attitude of, if you disagree with me, you're hurting me, and it's like, hey, man, that's not it. And also, yeah, it's like, don't, just because you like something. I mean, hey, you and I are going to get into new Trek, whether everybody likes it or not, because you know that's one of the reasons why I always hit you up for a new conversation. Oh, yeah. You're either like my Oprah or my bartender, where it's like, help me, Obi-Wan. I'm like, you know, let me help me figure this shit out, because as I always say, Rob, you're the chess master, the three-dimensional chess master, if you will. And I'm Kirk. I might get a gambit here and there, or I'm Deanna Troi trying to play Data, but not succeeding the way she did or whatever. So yeah, I mean, and again, it's it's like, everybody relax. It's okay to disagree, and we're not saying don't like it. I mean, good Lord, we say it both on our shows constantly. If you like new Trek, outstanding. If you like anything new that you and I don't like individually or together, great, whatever. It's cool. We're not here to say don't watch it. We just don't like it. That's all. And I get it. I try. Thank God there are young people that I've met. Some of my good friends in comics. Tana Ford is a tremendous Trek fan and a very reasonable person that, you know, we can agree to disagree. And even I'm like, come on, Discovery. And she's like, no, I get frustrated. I'm like, okay, that's all I'm looking for. That's cool. You know?
Oh yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm running at the mouth. First of all, hey man, on last week's Inglorious Trek Experts, or no, pardon me, it is this week's.
Yeah, the one about Friday. Strange New World. I mean, New Voyages. The book.
New Voyages. Man, I'm a couple years older than you, so don't worry. I've got 2 feet in the grave. I'm peering from the open grave. But that said, I was a little kid, and I remember going to Crocs and Britannos and finding Star Trek: The New Voyages, this great short story collection. And as you guys said on Inglorious Trek Experts, there was so little Trek transmedia is obviously the new. Well, actually, it's an old phrase, but you know what I mean. And yeah, I mean, and it was all fan produced. And I remember the best of Trek and those wonderful essays. But Strange New Worlds was such a great collection, and it's great. And in fact, listening to you guys prompted me to rebuy both volumes on Amazon. Thank God. And that's the thing, Rob. I haven't kept everything the way you have, and I love that you've got that Logan's book handy and stuff, because I find myself rebuying things that over the course of moving and stuff, have slipped or blending them to friends.
Yeah, and it's absolutely. And I think that a lot of this stuff, what's so funny is like, I think about this and like, so I've had this book since this book I've had for 45 years.
Yeah.
And I bought it. Now, what's kind of sad, I have to tell you this, I go to used bookstores and stuff.
Me too.
And I go into used bookstores and I see so many of these books that I own, that are in used bookstores. And because, no one, I saw this movie when I saw Logan's Run in the theater. My mom took me, and I saw it at the John Dance Theater, which no longer exists in Bellevue, Washington, or it was in Bellevue, Washington. And it was a big deal for me, and because it was this giant 70 millimeter presentation, and it really, again, I was such a movie fanatic as a kid, but it meant so much to me. And I'm not one of these people, like I'm a futurist. I'm constantly moving forward, but I do lament the fact that I wonder if people, like, I think it's really hard to have experiences today where your mind is blown by something, and I think because our culture has shifted. Like when I was a young fan, everything was out there. I wanted to get older and I wanted to go out there and experience it. You had to go into the world to make something of yourself. And it's kind of been inverted now. And now everybody, it all comes to them. Everything comes to you, and you can tailor your media diet and make sure that you only get things that or you're going to love. And part of the fun of being a fan when I was younger was not knowing anything about what you were going to see. And when you would go, it would be these transcendent moments. And I remember, like, after Logan's Run, and because Star Wars came out a year after Logan's Run did, and that was really a 1-2 punch, seeing those movies in the theater. Totally. And when I saw Star Wars, I just turned 10, and I said to my parents, because I didn't have any money, and I said, can I join the science fiction book club? And back then my parents were like, wait, you want to join a book club? I go, yeah, it's gonna be like, between $5 and $10 a month to get in, like 2 or 3 books or whatever. And
yeah,
back then you'd get the cool, like, newsletter, the little pamphlet that had the news, had the featured book, and you look in and you see all the other books. It was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And so I started reading the canon of great works of sci-fi, whether it was Robert Heinlein or Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov or Frank Herbert, Hal Clement,
E.E. Smith.
Yeah, E.E. Smith, Julian May, the Saga of Pliocene Exile. I mean, I was just reading all this. Anne McCaffrey, like the Dragon Riders of Pern, and I was just reading it all, whatever. I'm like, when I'd hear about other authors like Harlan Ellison, I remember getting a Dangerous Visions and again Dangerous Visions, the 2-volume set when he never finished. I mean, I guess J. Michael Straczynski's gonna finally have the final Dangerous Visions come out that he's been editing, but it was like, wow, it was, yeah. So it's like the thing was, you had to go get this stuff. And if you wanted, like, Star Trek novels, or you wanted magazines like Starlog or Fangoria or something, I would get on a bus and go buy them, and I had like this little, I'd go downtown Seattle and I would go to like B. Dalton Books, and I'd go to Time Travelers, which is a punk rock comic book store. You go to Golden Age Collectibles, and then you'd make these rounds, and I wasn't old enough to drive. And so you have to get this stuff. And while you were there, you're finding all these other things. And it was all the same thing. So I was buying records, and I was buying books, and I was buying magazines, and I was buying toys, and then home entertainment, home video, VHS tapes. I started working at a video store when I was 13, when there weren't any video stores. And it was all to fuel that thing.
Yeah.
And
the passion. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, I was filling my head with all this stuff, and I didn't have any friends. I mean, I was a really social kid. I had girlfriends at a young age, and I was very active in like high school government and wrote for my high school newspaper. And I always had jobs and everything. So I love the world. I wanted to be a part of the world, but I was a world-class nerd. I just didn't, you didn't. And it was something it wasn't that I was in the closet about it. If you came to my house and you saw my bedroom, I mean, it was stacked floor to ceiling, kind of like it is now. This is what my bedroom looked like, but it was just smaller scale. I mean, my ceiling was covered with movie posters, and beneath the movie posters were model rockets and model spaceships. I mean, I had hundreds of airplanes. I mean, and it was all that same thing, but it was basically fueled by an interest in the world, I guess. But there was, nowadays, it isn't like that anymore. I mean, people will read like Harry Potter books, but they won't go back and read like Tolkien, or they won't go read like the Stephen R. Donaldson. It's so funny to me because if you read Tolkien, you read the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. Everybody did. So, and then they were led to the Sword of Shannara books and with Terry Brooks and all that. And
sure.
And you just did that. Like, and it was all part of the same thing. You read books, you listened to music, you went to concerts. It was all, nowadays I feel it's not like that anymore. And
no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know, it's just different. But the thing is, in order to get this stuff, you had to go out into the world. Like, I would take a bus to downtown Seattle, in which case the sights and the sounds and the smells of the city, you could go to bakeries and buy fresh bread, or and as a kid, my parents were like, we started riding the bus to downtown Seattle when we were 10 and 11 and 12, and
yep,
it was my parents never thought anything of it. I'm like, Mom, I'm going to downtown Seattle, and we knew all the buses. We knew how to get to all the movie theaters and like the art house theaters or whatever. And Seattle at the time had per capita more movie theaters than any other city in the United States.
Oh wow.
And yeah, it was incredible. So we had like great art house theaters like the Neptune and the Harvard Exit and all these different, we had the film festival, and it was a great place to grow up. But I feel like a lot of that has changed. I'm actually sort of, it was funny, a couple weeks ago, I decided, I'm like, you know what? I am a gatekeeper. I'm going to be a gatekeeper now. And you need to tell me what science fiction books you've read. And a lot of people did not understand it was a bit, I was doing a bit and people are getting all mad. And then you get the second wave people on Twitter that don't know you, but they've seen retweets of something that you've said. And like these performance activists, they'll come right after you and be like, who are you to gatekeep and blah, 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 fuck you. And they don't even follow you or know you or anything. So they don't understand that you were kind of doing a bit in the first place.
I'm happy.
Which is sort of funny.
Well, but if they don't hear the tone of your voice, it's very easy to read something and be like, who the hell is that? And it's like, relax. You got to put the smiley face on. You got to do some, or an eye roll or something like that. Just kidding. And yeah, I know, man. Again, this is why I do audio and video. It's like, you can't mince my words. It's right there. You can hear the inflection. You can hear the smile or watch the smile. No, I get, and dude, just like you, I was riding buses to go to downtown Chicago to get stuff, or riding my bicycle. Thankfully, Chicago suburbs had a pretty good comic shop and nerd store scene. And mentioning Star Trek novels, I'm a massive old-time radio fan, and I forget if it was Dimension X or X-1, two of the great 50s sci-fi anthology radio shows. But one of them did Surface Tension, which is a James Blish short story.
Yeah.
And I was so excited because other than the Star Trek novels, I hadn't read any, or I should say the adaptations of the Star Trek TV shows that he did in short story form. And those are great, and I loved them. But it was so great to hear an original James Blish story. And it's a fantastic story. It's amazing. It's about for Bottled City of Kandor fans, it's the world is facing the end days. And these scientists figure, well, why don't we put human beings and miniaturize them to microscopic things, and maybe those successive they evolve in a faster rate, like a week is like 100 years or whatever. And like, well, maybe they'll find a cure. Maybe they'll figure out how to save the end days. Great story, amazing story.
Yeah.
So and especially 50s radio, and so are you an old time radio guy?
You know what? I loved radio dramas, but for me, the thing that got me into it was the CBS Radio Mystery Theater hosted by E.G. Marshall.
Oh, yes.
And
me too, man.
I loved the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. I loved it. And
it was the best. How late was it on? How late was it on your time?
It was on at 10:07 every night. So after the news.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it was 10:07. And what I really liked about the CBS Radio Mystery Theater was because it was CBS, they used the music from the Twilight Zone.
Yes, they did.
And I loved that because I knew the cues. I didn't know the names of the cues, but I knew the cues, and I loved it. I loved it. And they had great actors in that show, and it was Fred
Fred Gwynn,
Oh,
Herman
yeah.
Munster was a regular on there, and so many wonderful character actors that did both on camera, but also were veterans of old time radio, because Hyman Brown, the producer, produced Inner Sanctum back in the 40s, and that's the first time he used a creaking door to open a show.
Oh, and that was, and then they had the music, and then the drum would come in.
And exactly.
Then,
wah, wah. Absolutely, man.
And then you'd hear the wah, 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 wah,
man, wah. I'm E.G. Marshall.
Good evening.
And this Radio Mystery Theater was written by Sam Dan. Sam Dan must have written like half of the 1,000+ episodes of Mystery Theater.
Oh, and
but it was
some of that shit was terrifying. Like I would listen to it.
And my God.
I would be so scared in bed.
Yep. Oh no. And dude, I even, honestly, much like you, I always want new, exciting things, but I can't deny between the old time radio, things like archive.org, the Internet Archive has a shit ton of old time radio, and also YouTube does as well. And also a lot of great 50s, 60s, and 70s TV that either I remember and love rewatching, or like I finally saw The Lieutenant, the Gene Roddenberry show that he made before Star Trek, the Army show. It's great. Fantastic.
It was
and
great.
And the Defenders, the original Defenders with E.G. Marshall and then Mr. Brady.
I used to love that I love that when it was on. I watched that all the time. That began my love of legal dramas.
Oh yeah. And again, these are like the cream of the crop of live 50s television, then transitioning into the 60s and either going into the movies or making great film television. And Reginald Rose, who was one of the great pioneers of live television, great producer, went on to do The Defenders, and Defenders was a fantastic show. Yeah. And of course, the original teleplay that they did live, the two-parter, it was William Shatner as the Robert Reed character, and it was Ralph Bellamy as the E.G. Marshall character, and they were defending Steve McQueen.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Man. Yeah, it was, and I feel that stuff was so formative for me, and it's not that I think that everybody, if you didn't have that experience, you're missing out or something, but it was interesting that we had all of these things. And, you had to, like, I didn't have any friends that were listening to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. It's like, come on.
Me neither.
And there was nobody that I could even tell that I listened to it, because it was like this private, it was a private thing that, I listened to on my own. There was really no way to explain to somebody what that meant.
The appeal. I'm with you, man. Yeah, I'll tell you, I can't even think of grade school friends or junior high friends that were into Star Trek the way that I was. So no, I get what you're saying. As I got into high school, then I started finding people. In college, I didn't see Twilight Zone. They didn't rerun it in Chicago for whatever reason. And I had to go downstate to Central Illinois, to Illinois State University. And that's when I finally got to watch Twilight Zone episodes. And it was thrilling because I had known the pedigree. I would buy the same softcover encyclopedias of sci-fi television and film that I know you bought back in the day.
Yep.
And that's when I learned about these shows. And I'm like, oh, man, I really want to see this. And I remember Night Gallery being on NBC when I was a little kid. Scared the shit out of me.
Oh, yeah.
But I loved it nonetheless.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that stuff so much.
I'm telling you. And also, it's funny. Somebody said it earlier, and I agree with what you're saying in terms of us having, and other people watching were acknowledging the way they had to travel out by bus to get all the nerd stuff that they love. I remember, too, that Patton Oswalt just a couple years ago wrote a great essay about, it was harder for us to like travel to get the tokens we wanted, or the books or the movies or whatever. Yep. And now, it's a blessing and a curse, as my aunt would say. But with eBay and Amazon reselling things, third-party vendors and things, it's a lot easier to find this stuff now. But it's a shame, because it really was, like you said, I mean, it was a quest. It was our own little nerd quest to go downtown and pick up that, Doctor Who piggy bank that had the Tom Baker, the TARDIS and Tom Baker peeking out of it, stuff like that.
100%. And you couldn't. I mean, it was a bizarre I mean, you think about it now, like it's so weird to me because there was a book. I think I've told this story a lot, but there is a book that came out in 1978 in the wake of Star Wars called Sci-Fi Now, and it was a pictorial history of, well, it was said science fiction, but it's basically of science fiction, fantasy, and horror.
Yeah,
and it was a pictorial history of all the movies. And I remember buying the book and I said, I'm going to see every movie in this book. And it took me forever, but I finally did. I finally saw every movie in the book except one. And I bought the Blu-ray of the film, came out, and I have it. And I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it. Like Richard Lester directed it. It's called The Bed Sitting Room. It's an English set post-apocalyptic, surrealist post-apocalyptic novel. And I don't want to see it because if I see it, then I will have seen every movie that was in Sci-Fi Now. And I don't want it to go away. It's like I have this series of books behind me by a guy named Andrew Vox. And he wrote.
I know Andrew Vox, absolutely, man. Go on and explain who he is.
Okay, so Andrew Vox has written, I mean, he's written Batman novels, but he wrote a 20-volume series about this character named Burke. And Burke, it was a character that was sort of born out of his experiences in the legal realm defending children from serial abuse. And so this character...
He's a hero in those circles, beyond being a lawyer. I mean, this guy is a real hero and advocate and really got involved in a lot of horrendous cases where child abuse was going on. And in fact, his Batman novel kind of focuses on that as well.
Yes, it does. And I've got that right over there too.
I have it as well.
He wrote these books about this character named Burke, and Burke is a character in New York City, and he has this extended family that helps him defend children when children, whether they're being trafficked or they're really dark novels, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And so the last one came out, Another Life. Never read it. I don't want to read it because it's the last Burke novel. I know it's such a weird, and it's funny because sometimes I would have exchanges with him on Twitter, and I told him that, like, I've got a first edition of Flood, the first book, and a first edition of Strega, and I'm like, I have Another Life. I don't want to read it, dude. It's such a weird thing, but
no, I get it. He collaborated with Jeff Darrow,
right?
Fantastic artist, and I've gotten to know Jeff. And Jeff was one of my early, like, I can't believe Jeff Darrow wants to do word balloon. That's great, like 2005. And Andrew Vex even emailed me, and he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to download your conversation with my buddy Jeff Darrow." I'm like, "Jesus, man, I'm such a fan." I'm like, "I'm so glad that you're like aware of my little bullshit show. This is great." So no, he's an incredible man. He really is, and he's a hell of a writer. And yeah, if you can handle dark crime, true crime, or at least based on true crime. I mean, yeah, he's one of the greats.
Oh, he wrote a non-Burke novel called Shella that is just devastating. I mean, I read it and I was like, oh my God. It was so hardcore.
I'm hip. Absolutely.
And, I'm like, I would love to make this into a movie. I don't know if you could do it now, but and that was another thing, like all of those books, like I would get into whether it's James Lee Burke or Andrew Vox or Jay Clark, he writes under Andrew or Michael Slade, the books, the Special X books out of Canada. I mean, just these are just all, it's all part of the same stuff that it feeds. See, I liked all different kinds of stories. I just didn't want to read comic books or Star Wars and Star Trek. I was interested in all of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's so there's so many things I'm interested in. And yeah. So and to this day.
Well, thankfully we had parents that understood us reading, for lack of a better word, the trash and stuff like that. It made us want to graduate to novels. And that is the one great thing of my father, man. I mean, literally, he taught me how to read by reading the funnies to me, and and helping me do that at a very young age. and it just, exploded my head in terms of I want to read more and let me read more complicated things. And in great ways, comics have grown up as well, as certainly in the last 30 years. I mean, not just in the last 20, where I really think the big leap has happened, but even things in the 90s like Preacher, and when Neil Gaiman was doing his stuff, whether it was Sandman or Miracle Man and things like that.
Oh yeah,
a lot of Vertigo. Yeah. So I mean, it's a much bigger world. In fact, I was talking earlier to Dan Penosian, the wonderful artist, and he's got a new horror Western that he's doing with Scott Snyder that comes out this week, and it's called Canary. And it's beautiful. It's very evocative of Jean Giraud, Mobius, who did those great Lieutenant Blueberry Westerns back in the 80s and stuff. And when Joe Kubert was doing Tex. I mean, these guys get it. And clearly, I didn't ask Dan, but I could. In fact, well, Dan told me his nickname was Duke, or his middle name was Duke. His dad named him, gave the middle name Duke after John Wayne. And you could tell there's a wonderful panorama widescreen panel that he has promoting Canary, and it's so John Ford, Monument Valley kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's great. No, these guys get it now, and also I'm really glad, as we continue in our various tangents, I'm really glad that the other genres beyond superheroes are being explored and appreciated by the audience, and it's good. I mean, honestly, I still love a good superhero story. I'm no snob, but I do welcome. Sure. But I do welcome Westerns and crime comics and sci-fi. Horror, my God, the last 20 years. Jesus Christ. I mean, just the leap in product. I saw Ben Templesmith, the great artist of 30 Days of Night, with Steve Niles back in the day. And, now they're just another book on the shelf, and there are so many new and exciting horror comics as well. I mean, my buddy Mike Morisi is killing it at Vault with some of the stuff he's been writing lately. And there's wonderful new artists and writers. Afuo Richardson is a wonderful artist who has been doing great horror comics and also worked on, now I'm blanking, the HBO show from last year that was about the struggle that blacks had in the 50s. Rob and I scratch our heads trying to remember that name of that.
Yeah, that show is harsh too. Yeah, I mean that didn't hold back, that show. And why am I drawing a blank on what it's called?
Yeah, shame on me too, man. I'm sure somebody in the chat will help us out, because that's the great thing about the chat, and we all appreciate that, seriously. But yeah. Oh, by the way, Stubble, what did Stubble say here? Hey, Stubble, I'm really glad you're watching, man, because I always enjoy your contributions to Rob's show. But here, hold on a second. My laptop's being persnickety. Oh, there's Mike Conrad. Comics helped me learn to read as a kid, helped me enjoy reading as an adult. Absolutely, my man. Thank you. There we go. Mike did get it. Lovecraft Country.
That's what. Yeah. That. I was thinking of that other show, about the black family that immigrates. They go west. They go west to L.A.
I don't think I saw that one. Wow.
They move into a neighborhood. It's really good, but it's hardcore.
I'm sure. Hey, I'm so glad you, speaking of TV, have caught up on For All Mankind, because I was bugging you about that a couple of years ago, and I'm like, you've got to watch this. You're going to love this. Oh, and I'm so glad you're in.
I love it. And not only that, Bill Hunt, my friend Bill Hunt, who does the digital bits, is a huge fanatic of the show. And they released on Friday, they released the rest of the episodes of the season to the press, because they only showed the press the first 8 episodes, but then they released 9 and 10. And Bill called me up and he's like, you're not going to believe where the show goes.
Excellent.
And like season 2, it's funny. There's a lot of people that I know that I've told to watch it, and they criticize the melodrama of the show, the regular lives of people. And I'm like, yeah, but that's built into the show. And the melodrama is kind of part of it, because you're not dealing with superheroes. You're not dealing with heroic characters. You're dealing with everyday people that happen to be working in this extraordinary profession. So it needs to be offset with normal people. And people talk about, well, they're not getting the space right. Well, they're getting it pretty right.
I think so.
They're extrapolating. It's pretty right. And
yeah,
I think that's great.
Joel Kinnaman kills it. The whole cast is great.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love it, and I can't wait to see where. I mean, clearly, obviously, we're gonna have a scandal with the president, and I don't want that. And Margot's in trouble. I don't want that either, because I love Margot.
Yeah, she's amazing.
but it's coming down the pike, you know.
Great score too.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of that original jazz that they made for the show as well is just so good. No, and you know, as you well know, it's produced by Ron Moore, and I think is David Icke with him again or no?
No, not on this one.
But Ron Moore, I mean, I think you've said it as well. It's like this could be a Star Trek prequel. I mean, this literally could be.
Well, Ron Moore himself has even said that.
Has he? Okay, that's.
Oh yeah.
That's great. That is great. No, it is so amazing. The one that I've waited on, and I have no idea why, and I know you love the books, and I do want to, at the very least, watch the series, is The Expanse. And I do love good space opera politics. That's the best thing about Babylon 5, in my opinion. And I know that they do it even better in The Expanse, and everyone just glows about it.
Yeah, The Expanse is great, but I have to say, I thought the last 2 seasons sort of petered out because, you know, they weren't bad, but they only did the first 6 books, and then there's books 7, 8, and 9 that go even further. But The Expanse is really, really good, but it's the fact that it's going to end is kind of I wish it had gone on further, but it's still great.
Well, and that'll just prompt me probably to end up buying books 7, 8, and 9 if I watch the first 6.
Oh yeah, no, definitely,
you know,
definitely,
which is great. Which is, man, I'm looking forward to the Orville novella that's coming out at the end of the month.
Yeah,
and for people who don't know, you know, they wanted to make 11 Orville's. I think budgetary reasons kept them only 10, so we still have like 3 to go, thank God. But also, so Seth MacFarlane decided to turn the 11th episode into a novella. And I don't know how you feel, Rob, but honestly, I know it started as a Star Trek parody and everything. It's its own thing, and if I'm Disney, I read the tea leaves. This is a sleeping giant that could really be its own franchise.
Oh, I agree, and this season has been really, really good.
Totally.
I've really loved this new season. I really particularly love the last episode. I thought was,
oh my God,
really, really great.
Evocative, in my opinion, of that 2-part Animatrix, where we see where the robots kind of revolt against the humans in that, and it literally was like, I wasn't afraid, but it was chilling in terms of that good. I forget the name of Isaac's race. The
Kaylon.
Kaylons, thank you. The good Kaylon that has feelings. It's like, okay, when's this guy gonna turn? When is this guy gonna?
I know, right? And when you find out where it goes, I mean, it's that the guy who plays Isaac, and now that they've been giving him more space time, they're letting you see him outside of his, you know, as himself. The actor gets, he is so good, and seeing him in that last episode when he does the change, he's having this great romantic thing, and then it's gone. I was like, no.
That's the thing, man. No, it's I'm amazed at how they pull at our emotions strings with stuff like that, and then completely 180 from that. Although there are still like heartbreaking moments. The Boys, good Lord, what a great season!
My God, so good,
unbelievable, and literally, The Boys is the most recent show I can think of where literally there are times I'm watching like this because I have to, and I'm still looking, but I am looking through my fingers. I won't deny it.
I can't even believe some of the stuff that I mean. On one hand, the storylines are so great and it's so tense, and especially everything with Homelander is so fucking scary. But I do feel that the writing in this season was incredible. The storylines were incredible. I really loved everything about what was going on in this season. It was just great. I just wish it was longer. You know, these 8 episode seasons. I'm like, come on, give me at least 2 more. You know, just when you're getting into it, but they did such a good job of parsing out the story. There was no filler episodes. They were all incredible. They all brought the story forward. The writing is better than it's ever been, and it's really amazing stuff. Really amazing.
I'm with you. No, absolutely. Well, and also hats off to Eric Kripke, because my first awareness of him as a showrunner, unfortunately, was when he took over Heroes, and it went in the dumper. And that's proof that as frustrated as we may get on a given franchise and a given showrunner, you can't count them out completely, because you never know. Even Chris Chibnall, who I have my disagreements with about the way he's handled Doctor Who, it's like, yeah, but he wrote really good Broadchurch episodes and the British Life on Mars, and I'm like,
didn't Kripke start Heroes, or did he come in later?
I don't remember. Later. I can't remember the name right now of the original creator. My friend Jeff Loeb obviously was an important writer and one of the co-executive producers. So he was my in. Tim something I know was, and again, I'm counting on the peanut gallery to help us out,
because the first season of Heroes was terrific,
amazing,
and then it just it went in the toilet.
Well, and the writer's strike didn't help, because it had that time off, and I mean, it lost its mojo, and that's a shame. But yeah, that first season is amazing, and really kind of the start of the current wave of new genre fiction, in my opinion, and the way that people point to things like The Sopranos in the late '90s as being where the new golden age of television kind of started. So,
oh yeah, for sure,
definitely. Great comments, everybody here. Let's see. Mike Kunrad is Kripke is supernatural and timeless, of course. Yes, and shame on me, because Supernatural is fantastic. I completely agree, and yes. First season, Tom agrees that Heroes' first season was amazing. Stubble says he hopes the Shogun series. Oh, I didn't know they were making a new Shogun.
Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about it. I don't know anything about it. It seems like it's disappeared into the ether. Tim Kring, that's Joe Byrne's right. That Joe Byrne is right. That's exactly what it was. It was Tim Kring.
Thanks, man. Yes, indeed, it was Tim Kring. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Glad everybody's watching, man. We must be getting a good international audience, Rob. Oh, look at you yawning.
I know. Well,
I'm 2 hours ahead of you. I should be yawning.
I know. It's funny because I did Let's Get Physical Media today, and I did my own show, and then went to play. And
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good, man.
I'm taxing you. Okay. No. And I figured, hey, man, this is us. Like, we both got our beverages. We're hanging out. We're talking bullshit, which is always great.
Yeah.
So, hey, Strange New Worlds. Yeah, I know, man. But I have to say, and truly, I always want to hear your point of view. Given what we've gotten from New Trek, this is the best. But unfortunately, I agree with our buddy John Price, who's like, right now it's at the level of good fan fiction. And I kind of agree, and I see what he's saying. So give me the general thought of Strange New Worlds before we eviscerate poor Paul Wesley, who I do feel bad for.
Oh God,
being New Kirk. But go on, tell me your thoughts on all.
Well, I mean, I think the casting of him and the way he's written is a perfect example of here. This is what I don't understand about Strange New Worlds. I don't get this at all.
Talk to me.
They could have made their own, like Anson Mount. Everyone loves Anson Mount. He's an impossibly handsome dude. Everyone likes him. He's very, very charismatic, and they've built a show around him, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Nothing they've done. When I look at that show, I always talk about verisimilitude and all that. I don't believe any of it. I don't believe the sets. I don't believe the colors that they use to light the sets. I don't believe any of it. And if you're making a new show, I just don't understand why they've co-opted Christine Chapel. They've co-opted Uhura. They've co-opted Dr. Mbenga, who I actually like that actor, and I like the character and the way he's portrayed. And now they're going to have Scotty. And the way they leaned into Balance of Terror, which everyone likes because it's so familiar, I'm like, that made no sense to me. Like I'm and the idea that Anson Mount has seen his future with Klingon time crystals, which is the dumbest shit ever. It's so stupid, those Klingon time crystals. And the fact that if you know your future, there's two things dramatically that I disagree with. One, it doesn't matter what you do in the present. It doesn't matter what cockamamie adventure you go on, because you know you're not going to die because you've already seen your future in the time crystals. So you can go save the galaxy, you can do the most risky shit ever, and you're not going to die. Because you know you're not going to die because you've seen how you do, well, not die, but how
trapped in that body. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, by the way, they stole all this from a Star Trek novel called Burning Dreams by Margaret Wanderer Bonanno, but we won't go there.
Love that book. Love that book. Go on.
Yeah. And two, the other thing is that, Spock and the way that they've gone back and they're showing us T'Pring, and they're just changing these characters. And I feel like here's what I find so odd about modern Star Trek. I understand that since 2009, they want to go back to Spock and McCoy and Kirk and all that. My problem is that those characters were never like James Bond. They replaced the actor all the time. We grew up with that. Right. But Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and Shatner played Kirk, Spock, and McCoy from 1966 all the way up through 91.
Yeah.
And we saw them age and grow. And so, and I understand new audiences are going to see them in different generations and all that. But the Berman era of Star Trek, and even Roddenberry himself, when Star Trek The Motion Picture came out, they pushed the universe forward.
Yep.
And they were always creating new things and new characters, new situations, new alien species or whatever.
Right.
And the idea that these new Star Trek shows that we're getting, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard, they're all variations on a theme. And we haven't seen any of these creators create new characters out of whole cloth. I mean, to a certain extent, Discovery did, but other than Michael Burnham, again, Spock, again, right. Sarek, again, you've made, first of all, the galaxy very, very small. And I just don't know why these creators, and when you have Spock, you want to tell stories about Spock. And I don't think Ethan Peck does a bad job.
He's gotten better.
But yeah, he's gotten better. But I'm like, it isn't Spock. And when you see him cavorting around with T'Pring, I mean, look, even Dorothy Fontana said, Vulcans fuck. They don't just have sex. They don't. This idea that fans had and the way it was portrayed, I never, even as a kid, I never thought that Vulcans didn't have sex except once every 7 years. Once every 7 years, they have to mate. They have to procreate. But that doesn't mean, in my mind, in my head canon, Vulcans would be the best lovers in the universe because they would look upon, so to speak, they would look upon it as an art form.
Right, they're very precise.
Yeah, they're gonna, and they would be. I would imagine that Vulcans would be the best lovers in the galaxy, and hence Amanda Grayson. She knows what's up. She gets a freak on with Sarek, and it's all good. I'm having an interspecies marriage.
Way to go, Jane.
Yeah. So I was like, I always looked upon Vulcans like that, as and they never just had sex once every 7 years, which I always thought was stupid.
Yes.
And Vulcans have emotion. They've never not had emotion. They've always had emotion. They just control it.
Right.
And when they applied the teachings of Surak to their culture and applied logic and all that, that transformed their culture. It was a renaissance. It was like coming out of the dark ages through the age of enlightenment or whatever. It changed their culture. And of course they have emotions. They just control them. And which I think is great. But the way that it's like when I look at this show, I understand they want inclusion and all that. Yeah. I don't buy. No one on Strange New Worlds seems like they have any military discipline at all. I look at the way they talk to each other. I'm like, I don't buy this. I don't buy that you're on a starship. I don't buy that you're out on the final frontier. Everyone's so casual. And, because they have a principal cast they have to use. So Pike is cooking dinner for all of his subordinates and all like the cadets or like, where are his senior staff? I don't know. He's got number one who's barely got screen time, but where's the senior staff? It doesn't make any sense to me. I watch this show. I don't believe it.
They should do more of that. Please continue. That's okay.
Well, no, I mean, and that's kind of the way I just can't believe. I cannot suspend my disbelief when I watch this show, not only because it doesn't feel like Star Trek. I understand why people like it. I mean, I get it, but it's like, don't expect me. So you're telling me that this show feels like original Star Trek, like the original series in the 60s, and that's why I should like it. I'm like, That misses the point entirely. Star Trek is supposed to, and from, again, when the motion picture came out, it pushed forward the Star Trek mythos.
Yep.
In a way that you believed. You believed the new Enterprise. You believed Kirk when you met him. You believed the characters, and suddenly you're 10 years later. Or I know in canon it was like 5 years later, but still.
I'm with you.
And then Next Generation comes out almost 100 years later. New cast and crew, new Enterprise, new aesthetics. The idea that these ships would be out for a lot longer than 5 years, so that's why they were such comfortable hotel type ships.
Yes.
And then you've got Deep Space Nine, which took it in a different direction, and Voyager, which was a copy of a copy of a copy. And I've learned to appreciate some of it more, but I was not a big fan when it aired. And there's a lot of good stuff there, but again, it's a copy of a copy of a copy. Enterprise,
it was UPN keeping it. Hey, let's keep it the same. Let's not innovate. And I've heard, and as I'm sure you have, the people that wanted. And did you see the latest podcast that dropped today?
Oh no, but I love those guys.
I do too, and you're the guy that turned me on to them. And they do a great examination of the rebirth of New Trek, step by step. It's a great half hour. And I guess Brian Fuller was like, when he was on Voyager, hey, let's make Year in Hell an entire season.
Right.
And unfortunately, Rick, and who knows, probably the network as well. It's like, no. Well, done in once. All right, we'll give you the occasional two-parter, but that's it.
Yeah.
And again, it's a shame because that certainly watered down the possibilities, as you and I have discussed before, of what Voyager could have been. But yeah, it is. Yeah. It is what it is. Pardon me.
I mean, the idea that Voyager, I thought the idea that they're ever going to come home was stupid. I'm like, it's like Connery in Hunt for Red October. When Cortez went to the New World, he burned his ships. That way his men were properly motivated. I'm like, what if, you're a starship crew, you've been flung 75 light years away from your home, you're never going to get there, and you have to bring the ethos of the Federation to the wild, untamed. It truly is the Wild West.
Right.
You've got different technology, different alien races, a whole different set of experiences. And how do you world build? And to me, it just became, kind of a TOS TNG hybrid
rehash.
A rehash about getting home. And
yeah,
again, the writing relied too heavily on weird anomalies and time travel and all that shit.
Well, better than time crystals in our new Trek era.
Well, now now it's just another problem I have with modern Star Trek is just it's straight up fantasy. There's no qualms about, and I have to say, I can't deal with the fact that they've leaned so heavily into our modern identity politics. Like, you look at the characters, I have no problem, but other than Pike, it's obtrusive how few males there are in the cast, even extras when you're looking on the bridge. And I'm like, and why is it that all these characters have these weird modern butch haircuts? I mean, it's
okay.
so,
I'm with you.
It's weird.
I get it.
I mean, like when you look at Picard on the bridge, like Ortegas and the first of all, the costume coloring is wrong. I understand they want him in gold and they've got the two people at Con and Ops in red and it looks cool visually. But, part of the thing about Star Trek that they don't understand is they don't understand that there was the people that were making Star Trek. They understood that, okay, these are color coded uniforms based on where you're working on the ship. And they created this stuff in the course of creating this show because everyone who worked on the show, a lot of them were ex-military. They fought in World War II. So they brought a sense of military discipline or an understanding of how a military vessel would work. Right. And I don't buy that there's no discipline on these ships. There's no chain of command. Everybody talks to each other like they're in a workplace,
Right. It's
story.
The Office. It's Trek Office. It's
I don't buy any of it.
I'm with you, man. Ortega, finally, I'm sorry, Rob, real fast regarding Pike and Ortegas, finally in episode 10, stand down. Shut up. I am the captain. I'm giving you an order. I don't want your, here we go again. And when Nebula, shut up, Erica. How about that? That actually, shut up, ensign or lieutenant, whatever the fuck her rank is. And why don't we know what rank she is?
I don't think the actors know. They don't. I once read an interview with some of the actors on Discovery, and they don't know what their ranks or chain of command is on the ship. And I don't believe it, and it's not so, what's so frustrating too is when you see a lot of fans like me. I never thought, having spent a lifetime in fandom, that I would reach a point in my life where I would literally, the old man shouting at clouds, that people would yell at me. And I want to go, I mean, I never would say this, but I want to. I'm like, I have forgotten 10 times as much as about your, and I wouldn't say that because I'm not that kind of a person. And I don't want, but it's really difficult to talk about these things and to be critical of this when I've been immersed in it my whole life. And it's not, and what's funny is it's not because it's new, but it's like everything in the modern day. I think there is such a lack of understanding, like even in American politics, people don't take civics anymore. Right. So they don't even understand. They have when they're like defending the Second Amendment, or they're defending the 14th Amendment, or whatever the hell they're defending. They don't even know what they're talking about.
I'm hip.
And you listen to this and you're like, I hate these kinds of arguments. And I don't dislike Star Trek, and I'm all for all kinds of inclusion. But I'm like, look, if I'm watching Star Trek Discovery and they introduce me to a non-binary character that's 1,000 years in the future, you have to extrapolate, where's humanity going to be 1,000 years from the future? You certainly don't need a non-binary character who calls themselves a non-binary character telling a gay man that they have to use their pronouns.
I'm hip. I know. It was such an ignorant 30-second pregnant pause. And it's like, okay, I understand you're letting the current community know that, hey, we're cool with this. But if you really want to show them that you're cool with it, it should be, by the way, I go by them, they. Okay. And literally just be, sure,
but,
no problem.
But we would, when you're a spacefaring race, I mean, Spock and Amanda are an interspecies relationship. I mean, there would be so much freaky interspecies sexual contact in the future that no one is going to give a fuck about any of this crap on Earth. And like they say in Aliens, it doesn't matter if it's Octurian, baby. Nobody's going to care. All of this stuff will evolve out. And to me, when they do that, it shatters my, to me, look, if you want to do messaging, Star Trek is the perfect way to message, but you do it through allegory. It's the alien species that were stand-ins for us.
But you can also just, again, by just saying, okay, hey, listen, because you don't know until someone brings it up, and maybe that is the case 1,000 years from now, where it's like, she's great. Actually, I go by them, they. Okay. And literally, he just has to be like, oh, okay, great. And you move on because, as you say, it should be the norm, hopefully 1,000 years from now.
Yeah.
My God.
It should be the norm 100 years from now and 50 years
hell
from
yes. now. Well, I agree with all of that.
And that's the thing. And I find, to me, I've always considered myself a fairly progressive. I remember I got a book from the Science Fiction Book Club. I don't remember much about it, but it was called Future Love. And it was an anthology that dealt, because when I was a kid, I was a horny kid, so I was always getting any horror novels or science fiction novels, like James Herbert's horror novels or Graham Masterton's horror novels had these great long sex scenes that were awesome. but I remember, reading like Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, or you read Future Love, and I was always very interested, because I've always been interested in sexuality as a not just as more of an imaginative and creative exercise. Okay. Because if you really think about it, the actual physical act of coupling of the mechanics of human sex is a little silly. I mean, if you really think about it, it feels good, but all of it is in our heads, really. And the thing that turns you on is if you're with a partner that wants to be with you, and how to turn them on and all that. Oh, yeah. So I'm always and I've always disassociated human sexuality from procreation. So to me, I've always thought, like, when people are, whatever kind of play they're into, a lot of it comes from the imagination and creativity. And that's why I've never really had a problem. Like, I had LGBTQ friends from an early age, and it never bothered me, because I always saw that as sort of an extension of creativity, and not only biology being compelled, that physically, naturally, that you are not attracted to. I mean, I believe that both anybody who's gay or trans, you're born that way. You were made that way.
Agreed.
And the idea that you would deny that people are like, through my whole life, through my own experience, I have no scientific explanation, but I've had many gay friends in my life, and I can tell you they were born that way. They were naturally gay. I have no, and it's never I've never thought of it otherwise, and I don't walk around thinking, oh, he's my gay friend. He's just my friend.
Of course not. Of course not.
Know. And the same is true of trans people. The trans people that I know, I honestly believe that they are naturally. I do not believe it is a disorder of any kind. No. They were born that way as a natural effect of whether it was too much estrogen or testosterone or whatever in the womb. It's a real thing. You were born that way.
Yeah.
And to me, once our civilization comes to grips with that, then we can move forward. But a lot of people can't because we're programmed with various ideas. However, once humanity were to meet another spacefaring, an alien race, once we meet an alien race, any of these petty differences we think of on Earth are going to go away.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be eradicated completely. So in a Star Trek universe, the idea that you're bringing in modern identity politics, to me, I'm like, it's not that it's not the identity politics that bothers me. It's the unimaginative nature of the writers that don't know how to do anything with identity politics and allegorically tell me a story. That's why I love the fact that Bortus and Clyden on the Orville, that their society, males are the dominant. They have, and I love that because there's a way to deal with the same-sex relationship, but they're aliens, so people are like, oh, that is what it is. That's just what they are. And I thought that was brilliant, and that's what science fiction should do. And this last episode of the Orville has this matriarchal culture that I love the way they were portrayed, and I love the way that they eventually were able to deal with them, and there was hope that they were going to have a future together. I mean, I thought that was really, really great. And I've always loved stories like that. I've always loved stories that turn those things on their ear. But when I see the unimaginative way that Star Trek 1,000 years, because you know what? Human beings would be very different. Like, we're going to figure out ways to extend our lives by hundreds of years.
Yes.
So 1,000 years in the future, it would have been really interesting if all the humans we meet as part of that federation were hundreds of years old, because they would have lived through the burn, which is, by the way, the stupidest shit ever. Because
like the Yangs and the Combs, I'm sorry, like the Yangs and the Combs in the Omega Glory.
Yeah, and that's what I've always thought is that, look, this is a failure of imagination. You're going 1,000 years in the future. What you should do is like, okay, how would humanity change 1,000 years in the future? Where would be it? Our medical technology, our computer technology would have dovetailed. Biology, organics, and mechanics would be fused, and we would have nanobots in our systems repairing our cells all the time. You know, and not only that, it just, even in Star Trek Picard, the idea of synthetics. Here's the thing that really bothers me. Okay, so if you're going to have sentient AI, you're going to have synthetics walking around. Why are they all humanoids? Like, if you could have, why wouldn't you build like a space whale, like a sentient giant animal that is like a space tugboat, like a spacefaring that you created? Why would all of your sentient synthetic creatures look just like human beings? That makes no sense to me. Why wouldn't you build like giant living 50-foot long spider creatures with 10 legs that are specifically engineered to build starships?
Sure.
Like they would be able to build starships and walk across the hulls and all that.
Right.
And to me, it's like, no, you made them all look like human beings because you want to do a slave allegory and have a slave revolt and all that. And I'm like, because you're stupid. You writers are unimaginative. You were working on a relationship show for the CW a year ago, and now you're trying to write science fiction. And your mind, you do not have, and this is not a criticism. They don't have the imaginations to write science fiction because they have never extrapolated what that future might be. And that's what really bothers me about modern Star Trek. I feel that I'm watching a show and the writers are not very smart.
They play at Star Trek.
Yes.
They don't get it. They only understand it at a very surface level, and they take their cues, visual cues, and okay, fine. And again, yeah, they have a very one-dimensional view of Star Trek, and they don't understand sci-fi. I remember a couple of weeks ago, the Popcast people said it. And also, they succinctly put it, there's no joy or hope in Picard or in Discovery, and they're dreary shows, dreary shows.
Well, I will say this. I mean, I can't confirm or deny exactly why I know what I know. Picard season 3 is 180 degrees away from what Picard's been doing.
I'm so glad, man. I'm so glad. I might have told you in messages, but I know Word Balloon listeners and viewers know 2 weeks ago was Fan Expo Chicago, and Gates McFadden, Jonathan Frakes. And,
I saw that picture.
Oh, man. And they were all great. And Gates, good Lord. I'm like, hey, it was great because I remember even in Dream On, and I talked to her about Hunt for Red October, and she told me great stories about why she wasn't in the subsequent movies. I'm like, and what a short, role. She's like, they promised me more in the sequels, but I guess Baldwin was asking for a shit ton more money if he was going to continue with the series. So they recast him, and then they put Ann Archer in her place, which is a shame, although I love Ann Archer.
Yeah, I love Ann Archer.
But she's like, hey, she goes, I go, well, at least you got 7 seasons out of Next Gen. And she goes, you're going to love season 3 of Picard. She's like, I'm really excited. And based on your perception of what you know, that's great to hear.
And Gates McFadden kicks ass in season 3. If, of course, I would have seen any of it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's leave it at that.
Indeed. But Metalis on Trexperts really made me feel better in terms of what he said to Altman and Dockerman and company. And I'm like, okay. And then I read his IDW miniseries that he did for the comics, which was a great Borg story. It's called Hive. And it's like, okay, this guy gets it. And truly, I'm like, no, and I said this, and I know I was chiming in on your conversation with either Terry, but I saw Terry liked what I said, where I'm like, and you were talking to some of the people that are just entrenched in, no, sorry, they don't get it. They're never going to get it. New Trek's always going to suck. And it's like, no, man. I'm like, new creatives can change the course, and maybe Metalis will get the opportunity to tell a story that we're really going to like. And again, as Strange New Worlds, I have my canon complaints. We'll get to Newkirk in a second, but it's like, again, it's a move in the right direction. And I have faith. I every week on Discovery, maybe I'll like this episode better.
Do you have faith of the heart, though?
Sadly, I do. I know. Dude, I used to work in adult contemporary radio, so I used to have to listen to that kind of sappy crap for a good 5 years of my early radio career.
Here's my problem. I don't have faith in anybody else that's currently working in Star Trek other than Terry Metalis. None. And I will say this. How can I put this? The experience of Picard season 3 is such a 180-degree turn from what we've been seeing. It's jarring, but welcome.
That's great.
And I will say, I can't really say. There's a scene between two characters, Picard and another character. How should I put this? A legacy TNG character.
Okay.
Not one of the principal cast.
Okay.
Somebody who comes back.
All right.
That is going to be is a fan favorite, and somebody we haven't seen in a while. And there's a reason why this character is there, and there's a reason why Picard and this character have a history. They got a beef. And that's all I can say. And they got a beef. And they, because of things going on in the plot, they're sort of feeling each other out and conversationally. And then it dovetails into a confessions, recriminations. It's one of the great TNG character moments ever.
Wow.
ever.
That's so great.
Ever. And it is a simple scene of two people talking in a room. And I'm like, this is what I've been missing from Star Trek. And Terry Matalas made that happen. And that's not the only scene. There's a lot of great scenes that people have. And I'll tell you one thing. If they don't put this into if they don't make this a thing after experiencing or whatever I did of Picard season 3, I'll tell you one thing. They need to make a Worf show.
Oh, please.
And they need to make a Worf show as the character he's playing in Picard season 3.
Oh, please. Yeah, let it happen. Good Lord. I mean, when he was trying to pitch Paramount of doing a Captain Worf or whatever Worf show, I'm like, please, yes.
Okay, you know what? They're talking about making a Section 31 show.
Yes.
Get rid of it.
I agree.
The only show that they should be making right now, because I'll just say that Worf, he could be, let's call him an intelligence operative, the way he might be portrayed in Picard.
Wow.
Let's call him that. Just, to make conversation. He fucking kicks ass.
I'm excited.
Worf kicks ass. His introduction and the way he well, I can't say, the way he may or may not be dressed in this, call it, I don't know. Like I said, he could be an intelligence operative. Maybe he's wearing an intelligence operative kind of a new clothes that we've never seen before. Maybe.
Okay. All right.
If there's something like that, my God, he's so good, Michael Dorn. I mean, at least he probably is so good.
Yeah,
in this
I'm with
new
you.
incarnation.
That is so funny.
Yeah, and I'm just like, that was like, oh man, there's your show.
Well, as Mike says, he's hoping you're not blowing smoke up our asses for 3, and I know you're not.
Well, you never know. I mean, you never know. I could be a paid Paramount shill.
Of course you are.
Absolutely. I'm just
because of that wonderful relationship you've had with New Trek.
Yeah, they love me. Ask John Van Sitters what he thinks of me, and I like John Van Sitters.
Oh, is John really? Because I assumed he might be one of the few voices in the room that still, you got a decent. No.
I love John. Bad, I think he's done a decent job.
Yeah.
And he runs the brand, but I also think that there has been some, like, he was a huge proponent of why the Star Trek publishing was as good as it is. But yeah, I mean, Eagle Moss went out of business, and Eagle Moss was one of the great Star Trek licensors, and I'm still, everyone thinks I'm pissed because Axanar didn't get made, or I didn't. It's so weird. I'm like, I was never going to work. I've never worked in TV other than Femme Fatales. There's no reason I would get a job working on Star Trek in TV, even though, they should give me a job. But it would be so, let me just say, I'm glad, knowing what I know, I'm glad I don't work on Star Trek, because I would have slit my wrists. I would have jumped off a bridge.
Good Lord, yeah. Kirsten Byers, I have no idea, given the great output of Star Trek novels we got from her. It's really, I'm assuming her hands are tied in terms of whatever influence she has on the room. I don't know.
I mean, and I'm a big proponent of, like, David Mack, who's written for Deep Space Nine. I'm a huge David Mack fan, and his books are great. The problem is, it's one thing to be a novelist. It's an entirely different kettle of fish if you're going to work on a writer's room for TV.
Sure.
It's a viper's nest, and you have to really be strong it's a tough thing. It's very different mediums. I think one of the interesting things about, and I don't know Terry Matalas. I didn't know Terry Matalas. We've had exchanges on Twitter or whatever. Yeah. And I did like what he did with the 12 Monkeys, his 12 Monkeys series. Yes. I thought was really good.
Agreed.
And but from what I understand, he was able to do what he did with Picard season 3 because everyone else had moved on, or they were let go for various reasons.
Like Ira Bear being left to his own devices when
that's a very apt. I think that Terry Matalas did with Picard season 3 what Ira Bear did with Deep Space Nine.
Yep.
I think that's a very apt comparison.
I'm hoping, and again, yeah. And like I said, when I heard him on everybody, if they haven't watched or listened to the Inglorious Treksperts episode that they did with Terry, I really think he said all the right things. And my God, not just getting the Next Gen cast back. Hey, take advantage of all these other Enterprise, Deep Space Nine, Voyager actors, and let's get some movies made or whatever, and reuse your sets. And I understand what you're saying about the aesthetics of both Strange New Worlds and certainly Discovery. And it is what it is. I mean, I get it. I'm not happy about it because I think some very good fan films have been made where they can still manage to, recreate the look of TOS and still make it feel fresh and everything. God, when you guys were talking about the short stories of the new Voyages book, I'm sure you've seen that Mind Sifter James Cawley.
Yeah, that Mark Edward Lewis directed. It's not horrible. I mean,
well, it's to me, my comparison would be it's like going to a good university and seeing a good university production of a play.
Yes, I would
community theater.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting, and here's what's so weird to me. Like, if you look at Star Wars, they don't redesign the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
They might give it a square, a rectangular dish, but they don't redesign it. It doesn't need no one's ever thinking to themselves, well, we have to give the Millennium Falcon a visual update. And the funny thing about Star Trek is, like, I would say that, like, if you took the actual bridge of the Enterprise as it was built in 1966, all you need to do is relight it, shoot it differently, and redetail the bridge. Just redetail it, the buttons or whatever. Keep it exactly the same. You relight it, you make that shit work. And if anything, and this idea, well, we have to give it a visual reboot. Well, you're going to give it a visual reboot, and you're going to put a window on the front of the Enterprise, like in the bridge, like a window. It's a digital imaging system. It's a spaceship. You don't put a giant glass window on your bridge of this vulnerable and
to the elements. Exactly. Well, Rob, good Lord. Early episode of Strange New Worlds. Well, as we all know, space is very noisy. No, it's not. It's in a vacuum. It's like, Jesus Christ, people. I mean, come on. Where is this? I mean, and I love it because even on the Ready Room, Will Wheaton's show, here's our science advisor. Well, I'm sorry. No disrespect to the woman who I'm sure is very knowledgeable, but they must not be listening to her, or I don't know what happened. Because, God, Andre Bormanis, is that his name?
Andre Bormanis, yeah.
Bormanis, excuse me.
I think he's on the Orville. He might be on the Orville.
He is on the Orville. Yeah. And he graduated from being just the science advisor on Berman Trek to, being one of the writers.
Oh, he became a writer, yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's because this, again, it's like, no, you can't do that, and here's why. And again, it was such a throwaway line, and it's like, well, I'm sorry, but you just flunked whatever. Astrophysics, I suppose. I don't know.
And that's something that really bothers me. Now, it's there's something, I can't say what it is, and there's just a little thing, and I love this so much. There's a very little thing, a detail, and I ponder why this was able to occur. And who knows, maybe it won't make it to the final cut. There's a depiction of something, I don't know, let's call it a starship. There's a depiction of a starship that looks a certain way. It looks the way, say, someone like me would want it to look. And yet, in what they're doing in modern Star Trek, it shouldn't look the way it looks. It looks the way I want it to look. And I'm like, that's awesome. And I'm just like, and I'm like, it's such a small thing that I don't even, I can't say what it is, but when people see it, they're gonna be like, wait, how we what? Hopefully it'll, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in season 3. But I think what's most important now, there's a lot of people that are going to criticize. The only criticism that I think that is valid for this upcoming season 3 is a lot of people are going to say it's Star Trek's greatest hits. They're playing familiar songs again in a different configuration. And I'm like, that's very true.
Okay.
They are doing that, but they do it the same way that, say, Top Gun Maverick does it.
Okay, well, that's good.
And if what they've done, because remember, it's already shot.
Yes,
it's already shot. And if what they've done, if it's allowed, because I am sure Mr. Matalis is going to be fighting a battle all the time as people weigh in on this, the people that have worked on the show, and they're like, wait, what the fuck is this? And he's like, if he tried to explain it, I think he's going to get some pushback. And a lot of people would say to him, you should just change this. And he's going to go, fuck no, I'm not going to change it. Why do you care? Why do you care? Why don't you just let it be the way it is? Because everyone wants to chime in. And I would say let it be the way it is. Because
it's open.
Yeah, there's stuff in there that you're like, wow. Because that's my problem. I mean, modern Star Trek is just not well written.
Right.
That is my only beef. I have no problem with the actors. I don't like the sets. They seem ridiculous to me. Whatever. I don't like a lot of the production design. I don't even like the special effects, even though they're so good. But they don't convey Star Trek to me.
I'm with you.
And that's fine. But it's just the writing.
Yeah.
They've got all the other elements in place to make an incredible TV show. What they do not have is great science fiction scriptwriters. I mean, you think about the original Star Trek. Robert Bloch wrote an episode. Richard Matheson, Samuel Peoples, George Clayton Johnson.
Yep.
I mean, they had real science fiction and horror novelists writing episodes.
Yes.
Of that show. And it's like, I want to say that another problem that I have with a lot of modern Star Trek is there is generic relationship banter. Whenever they need to like humanize characters, like that fucking Alien ripoff episode, you've got our favorite character, Hemmer or whatever. He's having a conversation with Uhura, and they're having a generic relationship conversation about, well, you should stand up for yourself, and it could be plugged into any show, and they're putting it in Star Trek.
I'm with you, man. I hated in Discovery when things are tense in that last season, and Saru has to confide in Michael Burnham. Oh, the Navarre. First of all, fuck Navarre. Good Lord, I hate that. I hate that, but
hate it.
But yeah, the Navarre lady doesn't like me. It's like, what is this, 7th grade? I thought the universe is in peril again. But yeah, it's, oh, God damn it. No, I'm so with you. And also, Hemmer was the most interesting new character to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
he was
glad
great.
to hear,
the actor was great.
I'm glad to hear that Bruce Horrick is coming back next season, much like Robot Girl from Discovery. They brought her back, but now she's a human, and maybe that's the case with Bruce Horrick. I'm assuming as much. And that's why it also sounds like, as much as we're like, oh, shit, here comes Scotty, it's like, no, I read an article recently where the other, not Goldsman, but the other showrunner, Henry
Alonso.
Yeah. Henry Alonso Myers was like, don't worry, Scotty, that was just for that episode. And my assumption is, much like Robot Girl on Discovery, maybe Bruce Horrick will be the new chief engineer and a different character. But it bummed me out because Hemmer was like Odo. Hemmer was a great alien character.
And he was original to the show.
Yes.
He was an extension of the Star Trek mythos, and they kill him. I'm like, why would you do that?
Stupid. And also, as I'm sure you feel, okay, we've had 10 episodes, much like I don't know why Burnham needs to be Spock's sister. I don't know why La'an needs to be a Noonien Singh. She could be from a different augment, perhaps.
By the way, that's the dumbest shit ever. Again, the bankruptcy of the writing. It's just it's so terrible. Like
the worst.
Terrible.
I'm with you, man. Sorry, I was so excited with my gestures. Popped out my earbud. But
no. Just terrible.
I'm with you, man. No, 100%. All right, real fast, or it doesn't need to be real fast. And also, are you okay, man? I mean, I could go all night. You know me.
No, it's good. I mean, I'll probably have to go in like 20 minutes or something.
No problem. Yeah. All good.
Because I have to go on the John Campea show, but I always stay up late anyway.
Oh yes. So and yeah, I'm sorry, Rob. Of course. And
no,
also, first, okay, to finish Strange New Worlds, I genuinely feel bad for Paul Wesley, and I do understand that casting. I feel like the Star Trek producers of today, the new Trek producers, don't want alpha males, and they begrudgingly will take Pike, and certainly because of the fan reaction. But they gave Paul Wesley the right James Kirk dialogue and action. I didn't believe he was up to the role, and you don't need. I love this preemptive. Well, we don't want to do a Shatner imitation. Nobody's asking for a Shatner imitation. No. All we want is a man, as you would agree, and I'm sure you probably have more adjectives. He just needs to be charismatic and commanding. And sadly, they gave him the right lines and the right actions. I just didn't believe the man that was delivering the thing, and that's not his fault. It doesn't seem, and we'll see. Maybe he'll grow like Ethan Peck has grown. I have no idea. There is no swagger. There is no charisma. And my classic Hollywood example is when Henry Fonda played young Abe Lincoln. No, he's not the president yet, but he's still Abe Lincoln. And I believe, as I'm sure you do, based on the novels and comics we've read about Ensign Kirk and Lieutenant Kirk, that no, that's in him. That is part of who he is. He was always assured, commanding, and charismatic. Yeah, please.
Well, here's the thing. We now live in a world where it's so weird to say because I don't already people are conflating me with others all the time when I say stuff like this. But the fact is that modern Star Trek is a lot of it is a deconstruction to get rid of it's a very anti-patriarchal show.
Yes.
And it is very anti-male.
Yes, and I feel that way as well.
But what's so disingenuous is they've turned Pike into this very dashing, handsome male that is very appealing to women, and they've made his personality such that he's the kind of sensitive, nice guy. Let him cook for me. I mean, he's been turned into something that is appealing to the female audience, which, look, I don't have a problem with.
Sure.
But a lot of fans are like, to me, it's completely disingenuous. It does not track with anybody who's in a quasi-military environment. It does not track with anybody who's going to be on the final frontier. And what's really interesting is even the relationship with the woman, this strong, powerful woman who comes back at the end of the 10th season.
The other captain, yeah.
The other captain that is going to arrest number one. I mean,
yes.
And they make it adversarial between him and her just because she's his first officer. I mean, the whole thing about her, here's what I they're subverting the fact that number one, Rebecca Romijn's character, she lied.
Yeah.
She lied to get into Starfleet. She lied about being a product of controlled genetics. She lied about coming from this civilization. And even Captain Kirk, at the height of his, powers, William Shatner would say, "Look, I love you, man," or "I love you, number one, but you fucking lied. You lied. You came here on false pretenses." And the problem with that is you strain credulity. If this word of this gets out in the fleet, no one will believe you. And as a starship captain, I can't have any hesitation. If you give an order or we're going somewhere, no one can hesitate. You must engender trust with all of the crew. And now they're making it, they're going to turn it into this whole thing. They even played it that Pike's girlfriend, who has to come and arrest Una, is doing something wrong. And if I had made the show, I would have been like, I would have had Pike be pissed. you know, like, I don't have a problem with this because I always knew about it, but you think I like this? You've now undermined the entire command structure of my own starship. You have compromised the entirety of this ship and the crew.
It's
and then,
like Kirk to Spock in the Menagerie.
Yeah.
You know, in that first part when he's just like, do you realize what you're doing? You know, and
Jim, don't stop me. Don't let him stop me. It's your career and Captain Pike's life. Yeah, I mean,
you must come back next week and watch the rest of The Cage with us, because there's a lot of cool stuff coming up. And also, I would say, as Picard told Wesley, the first duty of Starfleet is to the truth. And it's, man, I mean, these are just inherent chain of command things. I am curious to see, because I'm sure we will have a Federation debate on augments based on La'an, based on number one's situation. What I don't want them to do is, clearly the Federation and Starfleet are wrong. You know, are you aware of Jesse Gender?
Yeah, I watch Jesse Gender a lot, actually.
So do I, and I don't always agree with them, but I will say I always appreciate their point of view. Jesse is a trans person, that's why I'm using the plural to be appropriate. But I understand their point of view that, well, to be anti-augment is kind of, an allegory to people of different orientations that are facing persecution and stuff. But I would suggest that, again, as you and I know, these were World War II veterans, and their concern was that manipulating genetics, as was done not only by the Nazis, but also here with the Tuskegee experiments.
No, I mean, there's a lot of horrifying eugenics experiments and points of view to get rid of people of color in this country. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yes.
And here's my another problem that I have with the fan base of Star Trek these days. They don't know their history.
Right.
So a lot of what they're arguing for, and they just don't know. And Jesse's saying that's a perfect example. You need to go in and look why eugenics is so monstrous and where it comes from. And
I'm with you.
You know, as somebody, I was adopted into a Jewish family, but you can't not be Jewish without a lifelong understanding of what the Holocaust meant and the idea behind it.
Yes.
And getting rid of, and they did want to create the experiments that were done, and it wasn't just the Nazis, it was the Japanese on the Chinese as well. I mean, all kinds of experiments, and that's what, and again, I think a strong understanding of history is something that a lot of the Star Trek fandom doesn't understand. And they're look, I think a lot of the fan base, there's a lot of people that I'm friends with that people don't understand. Like, why are you friends with those people? They don't share your positive outlook on life. I'm like, look, there's a lot of people that, I do like, because we're all fans, and they're willing to come out and hit harder against certain things. I mean, I think I'm a little bit more tolerant, but what's interesting is, as more and more people attack me, I get, you can't help but get defensive. And what's frustrating is to see the lack of education that a lot of people have, and they fall back to their performance activism to make up for their lack of understanding or nuance of certain subjects. And there's a lot more to those subjects than are being addressed. But and Jesse Gender's channel, I have to say, Jesse was doing lists of their favorite Star Trek episodes, and the TOS list that Jesse put out was excellent.
I'm gonna have to see that one. I saw the Next Gen and the Voyager list. I'll have to see the TOS list.
Yeah, and same with Deep Space Nine, but the TOS list, Jesse's #1 episode is Balance of Terror. And I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, of course, this was done, I believe, before see, here's another thing about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I honestly don't understand what they were hoping to accomplish with. I get the fan base embraces it, but I'm watching it. I'm watching that final episode where they're replaying Balance of Terror, and I'm like, this makes no sense at all. It doesn't make a sense. Why wouldn't you write an original story like Tapestry?
Totally said the same thing, Rob. Keep going.
Why wouldn't you do that? You have an opportunity to build your own canon for your own show with your own character.
Right. Yes.
And instead, you're replaying, not only you're literally replaying, the characters are saying the same dialogue. They even shoot it. There's a great video that it compares and contrasts. They even have the same camera angles.
Yes.
And you're looking at this. I'm looking at this going, first of all, what does Balance of Terror have to do with Captain Pike?
Nothing.
And first of all, not only does it violate canon, because Captain Pike, that you're showing that the Romulans are connected to the Vulcans. Pike's going to find that out. Maybe he keeps it a secret. I don't know. But here's what I really couldn't stand, and I didn't get it. So they're playing the scenes out on the Enterprise, and they're copies, direct copies, down to the camera angles.
Yes.
But yet everything that happens on the Romulan side of this conflict is totally different.
Yep.
And the Romulan Centurion, one of the great things about Balance of Terror is we get to see the Romulan commander and his Centurion have that great debate when the Centurion's like, isn't it our duty, if we can find a weakness, isn't it our duty to go and exploit that weakness? And Mark Leonard, as the Romulan commander, says, basically, oh, great. He doesn't say that, but he says, my gift to the homeland, another war.
Yep.
And the Centurion's like, but that's the way of things. If we find weakness, and Mark Leonard says, but must it always be so? And it's one of the reasons that episode is so great. In this episode, they have our side the same, but the Romulan side's totally different. You've got a douchebag Centurion who has nothing to say to his commander, sells his own commander out.
Right, is just a backstabber, as opposed to the mentor that the other Centurion showed in Balance of Terror. And I missed that. Go on, you're right.
Well, you look at it and you're like, okay, you've turned Balance of Terror into a gimmick now to once again further your own stupid agenda, your uncreative agenda, because you couldn't come up with a decent Picard or Pike story.
Yes.
So you're going to co-opt a classic Star Trek story, which makes no sense to co-opt this particular story at this time.
Yep.
Because you're using time crystals. So even though you're using time crystals, how would you find yourself in an alternate reality Star Trek, the original series episode that you have no connection to at all? Like, why would the currents and eddies of time bring you there? Just because if you were not on if you didn't get in this accident, even if you were commanding the Enterprise, would it be in the exact same place at the exact same time to put you through the exact same situation that happened with Balance of Terror? No. And then here's another thing that just irks me to know, and I want to punch my TV. So the character of Styles in Balance of Terror, Ops and Con, Styles is prejudicial against Romulans because he lost family members in the war.
In the original war, yes.
In the original war. So there's a reason why he's bigoted.
Right.
Well, just because she's sitting in the same place, they gave Ortegas that same role, but it wasn't earned.
No.
She doesn't have a family member that was killed. She has no reason to distrust the Romulans or the Vulcans, and yet they just put words into her mouth, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Why is she suddenly racist against Romulans?
No,
like, just because?
Yeah.
And when I see stuff like this, I'm like, the writers are bad. Like, oh, why does that matter? It matters because you've made me matter. You made it matter to me. I didn't ask you to co-opt Balance of Terror. I didn't ask you to write this. I want you to see that show. Strange New Worlds is so reliant on the original series. It's such a crutch.
Yes.
That they failed to write anything new or interesting. And then what do? Pike fails utterly in that episode. He gets fucking schooled. And, Captain Kirk loses his command. The Farragut blows up.
Right.
So they're all idiots. All of them. Well, I mean, I'm watching this show. I'm like, don't like Kirk. Don't like Pike. You're all idiots. You lost the war. The Romulans are going to invade. Thanks. Nicely done.
And all the Romulans, unfortunately, and again, no disrespect to these actors, could not the Romulan commander cannot hold a candle compared to Mark Leonard, and not having that great scene with the Centurion. It's like, well, in another reality, I would have called you friend. I see no evidence of that, none whatsoever.
No.
But I did in Mark Leonard's original performance and stuff. And dude, I'm so with you. And I was saying, and this is why I wanted to talk to you again. I feel like you and I are in the snake pit and we're surrounded by the crazy people. Oh, this is great. And it's like, am I nuts? It wasn't great. It was horrible. And I said the same thing. Come up with an original scenario. Although, Rob, I've never heard until watching YouTube critiques, and maybe you did years ago, I never heard the TOS movie uniforms referred to as Monster Maroon. But I love it. And it cracked me up when people were
They couldn't
like,
even get that right. I mean, I like what they did, but the white strap coming halfway down was terrible. I'm like, do you not like? I understand they added leather to it, but that white stripe looks so bad. Like,
You're
who
awesome.
looked at that and was like, "Oh, that looks good." No, it doesn't. Why is it that they have to fuck up every great design? I mean, if it was Star Wars, they wouldn't do that.
Have we verified the whole? Well, it's got to be 25% different rumor that we've heard since New Trek. Is that true? You know more insiders than I do. I got to ask my guys that I know.
mean, I have never officially heard this. The only thing I can tell you is that when we were working on the Next Generation Blu-rays, I hosted a roundtable conversation with the cast of the Next Generation.
Fan Expo, right, in Toronto?
It was in Calgary.
Pardon me. Okay.
Yeah, so they were up there, and I suggested they're already up there. Let's go up there for the 25th anniversary. And we shot them there, and it's on the season 2 Blu-rays.
I watched it, absolutely.
At the end of that sequence, there was a whole thing about, they talked about Star Trek 09 and seeing the cast, the original cast, rebooted. And they start riffing on it. It's very funny. And Patrick Stewart says, well, I already know what I look like when I'm rebooted. It's James McAvoy. And because of X-Men.
Because of X-Men.
So, it was a very charming, very funny conversation. And it was how that whole piece ended. So we sent, the way it worked is we'd make these pieces and send them in, and Paramount Legal would comment and tell us. Paramount said, under no circumstances can anybody talk about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. And I was so pissed. I'm like, what? What? Yeah, you can't talk about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. And I'm like, it's a documentary piece. You've got real actors talking about what it's like to be rebooted, which is a natural question to get into, considering Star Trek. What would happen if the TNG cast got rebooted? They said absolutely not. That was when I knew something was up.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know where that can go, but we certainly could not mention Star Trek 09 anywhere in our documentaries.
Ridiculous. Interesting. Well, again, we don't know.
Like, they're documentaries. And of course, it might have to do with the licensing agreement or whatever. But, you know, it's funny because I think Bad Robot, they wanted to get in on these like Bad Robot wanted to get rid of all kinds of classic Star Trek merchandise.
Yes.
And
this is JJ's production company.
Yeah, and they tried to prevent all that, like that great set La La Land Records released in 2012 of all the original Star Trek music. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's one of the greatest CD sets ever made. They tried to block all that stuff. And the problem is, as you can tell, Star Trek Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, you know, there's a company now called X06 that's making high-end Star Trek action figures. Their next releases are going to be Burnham and Saru.
Okay.
Are they going to sell? Who knows?
Probably not. Well, or not to the level of satisfaction that
you could buy.
For.
Eagle Moss was blowing out their Discovery starships for 75% off. And it's not that one of the great things about being a Star Trek fan is you used to be able to follow a lineage of like starships, ship design and uniforms and all that. Modern Star Trek blew all that out of the water.
Yes.
None of it's canonical. They want to change everything. The Mighty Maroon. I look at the Mighty Maroon, and I know there's talented costume people there. The white band that came down, I'm like, how do you look at that and go, oh, that looks good? It does not look good. And when I was watching, it just looked like a horrible mistake. It was like somebody tried to. It looked to me like bad cosplay. You're like, come on, man! If you're wearing that flap, that little white flap is the way it's structured, the way you do that. You don't go and I love I actually thought what they did was interesting. They used leather and stuff like that. It was but then they put this white strap, which looked like it was in the wrong place. It looks like whoever made the uniform put it too far forward, and it was so distracting. I'm like, this looks terrible.
I love you, man. That is so great, and I respect that, and I do appreciate that level of fan interest that you know that kind of minutia does not register on your radar. And it's like that doesn't compute. And again, man, I'm with you on, you know, again, redoing Balance of Terror and a lot of other things that they've tweaked. Or I mean, good Lord, the whole redesign of the Gorn. Fuck you. Strange New Worlds. Give us Strange New Worlds. Leave the Gorn alone.
Well, and what's so weird, here's another thing. Here's another thing that so they're asking you to believe that because they rip off Alien and Aliens, that the Gorn gestate in foreign, like other creatures, and then they're born, and then the alphas fight amongst themselves, these newborn Gorns, they kill each other off until there's only one alpha. Please draw me a line how that creature becomes an advanced spacefaring race.
Or more humanoid, for that matter, too.
Yeah, I mean, and you're looking at this stuff, and I don't think they even thought about it.
No.
Like, let's rip off Alien, and then Aliens. Let's have Newt. Let's have Newt be on the show. And I'm like, I look at this, and I'm like, don't you writers understand your own audience? That you're going to get hammered? Like, if you're going to rip off Ursula K. Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus, which is also another story they ripped off. And then you have Alex Kurtzman saying, yes, we really like this story. And so we use it as a basis for an episode. Oh, okay. Why not credit the goddamn author you're stealing from? And I really hate this. I really hate this new thing where, and I even talked to David Goodman about this. So check this out. And David Goodman confirmed this to me. So if you create a character, if you're a writer and you create a new character that then gets used in another show or is made into a series regular, you as a writer benefit from that, right?
That's why Nick Locarno from The First Duty,
that's right,
became Tom Paris.
That's right.
Go on.
Same character. Well, now because these writers are ripping off Star Trek novels and things, they can actually take characters that were created by novelists, write them into their scripts, put their names on those scripts, and if they keep those characters coming back, those characters can actually be owned by TV writers that did not create them.
It happened in comics as well. I know a couple guys that brought back some DC characters, and thankfully the original creators are like, pardon me, created the original version of that in the 70s and had good representation. And thankfully DC's like, you're right. Sorry. Here's money. And no, I'm with you. And of course, you pointed out the great, terrible example of that with Dorothy Fontana and her wonderful Pike novel, Vulcan Heart, I believe.
Vulcan's
where we
Glory.
really get Vulcan's Glory. Thank you. And we get more of Una's backstory and even the name Una. And it's Dorothy Fontana, good Lord, DC Fontana, one of the cornerstone writers of Star Trek. In fact, the previously mentioned, I believe, Omega Glory was a DC Fontana story. I mean, it is, and again, we're all about representation. We're all about strong women. Well, way to fuck over the strongest woman involved in the creation of Star Trek. Good job, boys.
Yeah, and then they'll tell you, they'll go, yeah, but we own that story. It was owned by Paramount. I'm like, yeah, but it wasn't owned by you. And now what you've done is you've co-opted this backstory. You've taken this you've had this character arrested, so you're going to delve into this backstory even further. And you're not crediting the very woman who is responsible for so much great Star Trek, for the way Star Trek is. You've stolen from her book. And the excuse, all I hear is, well, we own it all. Okay, great. You own it all, so you don't have to pay anybody any money. But how about based on the story by, based on the novel by?
Well, and also
the fucking credits,
right? And also to point that out to old time fans that are maybe less as literally knowledgeable as you are or me. Oh wow, that's great. That very cool. Special thanks to Dorothy Fontana. Something to acknowledge the history and the pedigree, dude. As you know, and I saw John Price commenting on it, or I would have missed it. They've got this wheel. Oh, pick your favorite captain, pick your favorite engineer, or whatever. And there's nobody from DS9, there's nobody from Voyager, and there's nobody from Enterprise. And it's like, that's a lot of fans that we absolutely would love to tell you how wrong your fucking wheel is, assholes.
Well,
whatever.
Even in they had Star Trek Day at Paramount like last year.
Yes.
And they had like Prodigy and Lower Decks.
Yeah.
They had all the Star Trek shows except the original animated series.
Yes.
I was like, what the fuck is that about? I mean, created by Roddenberry, won a daytime Emmy. You know, you had a lot of the
very instrumental in the original series. Again, great sci-fi writers like Larry Niven and Peoples doing scripts. No, I'm with you, man.
Slaver Weapon, and She Wrote Yesteryear. More. I mean, you look at this stuff, and it's like, fuck these people. I mean, honestly, fuck them. Fuck them.
It's so disappointing.
It's also so disrespectful, and for all their because you know what that tells me? That tells me all of their portrayals of inclusion, it's all bullshit. It's performative. They don't really believe it, because if they really believed it, where they would make sure things were taken care of is someone like Dorothy Fontana getting the credit she deserves, or Ursula K. Le Guin, who wrote The Left Hand of Darkness, which is one of the great examinations of gender in science fiction history. But no, they talk about, well, there's this Ursula K. Le Guin story, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaut, that, by the way, won a fucking Hugo in 1974, and we thought it'd be the great basis of this show. Then really, I mean, I know you don't own the story, you just ripped it off and didn't credit her, but you're in interviews talking about how it was inspired by that story. Like, you know what? Here's an opportunity to let a bunch of brand new fans to know that, oh, here's a great female science fiction writer who wrote The Lathe of Heaven, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time.
Absolutely.
And it's like, she wrote that, but let's not give her any credit. Let's just steal her shit. And I mean, that's just the way they do business. And it's like, it's so antithetical to what Star Trek is.
Yeah.
And you look at this and I'm like, I get it. You know, it's like watching, look, Jenny Lumet, who, by the way, I've made this mistake before, but Jenny Lumet, who is Sidney Lumet's daughter,
she's wondering, go on. Yes.
She's Lena Horne's granddaughter. So she's multiracial.
Sure.
But, you know, she's not. But when she's adapting, they're doing a sequel to The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yes.
You know, and that's what their show is. And when she says, and I can understand why she says this, but if she says that one of the reasons that, you know, I wanted to write these kinds of stories is if one black woman says to me, I feel seen because of your show.
Yeah.
Well, how about writing a show for everybody? And how about, if you're going to do that, are you going to go back and take Walter Tevis's work, you know, and co-opt it and turn it into something that it isn't in order to further your own agenda? And that's the thing. I don't want to talk like so many other. It's not about hate. It's about, you are abusing the great power that you have by being able to adapt this material and not serve. You're now changing the intent of the original author, and you're changing the work. If you want to do that, why not create something original? Why are you going back into these previous creators' works and trying to denigrate it by putting your own spin or your own agenda into the overall, what the story was really talking about?
I'm with you.
And that's why, you know, a lot of people are against. It's not that, look, I'll watch anything, and if it's good, I'll acknowledge it's good. But nowadays, when you hear creators talk about, well, the reason I did this is because I want one person to feel seen. Well, who are you? Do you have a messianic complex? I mean, are you now saying that, well, you know, I'm the only one that understands this, and let me tell you what I'm going to teach you about being a human being? I'm like, first of all, who put you in charge? Why do you feel the need that you need? Tell me a good fucking story. And if you're a great storyteller, all of those messages will be inherent in the work that you're doing. It'll be there. And you don't have to, and that's what I find so frustrating.
I'm with you, man.
You know, and it gets angry, and I get angry, and I feel that modern Star Trek has been entrusted to people that, one, just aren't that good at writers. They're just not good. And when it comes down to it, ultimately, I'm like, if you're writing generic relationship conversations that can be plugged into any show, I don't want to watch what you're putting down.
I'm with you.
So
no, I'm with you, man.
I feel like, but on the other hand, you know, let's just call Star Trek Picard season 3 is a rousing Star Trek sort of greatest hits remixed in such a way that it is a rousing pulp adventure that takes things from the past, some things that are very surprising. I was like, wait a minute, are you telling me that this is actually a blank to blank? And it seemed that way. And
cool.
who knows? Because it kind of was, and I was surprised by that. But it's very much a show geared toward the diehard Star Trek fan, and it seems like the original cast, the TNG cast, they were all having a ball because they were written that way. If I read scripts, who knows? Maybe I did.
Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Well, it took him 7 years to kind of, at least it sounds like, partially get it right. And that's good, because ultimately Star Trek is about hope, and we're all hopeful for better Trek. And like I said, I mean, after Batman and Robin, the Schumacher Schwarzenegger movie and everything with George Clooney, everyone's like, well, that's it for Batman. I'm like, you are high. I'm like, and back then I'm like, give it 3 years, they'll reboot. Well, they don't even wait 3 years anymore.
No,
they'll, I mean, so they'll fix things and make it better. And if it gets such a negative response, and that's why I'm really interested to see what happens with the Marvel Universe. Not to get into another subject, because I think you want to get to bed and get ready for camp.
Yeah, I do have to go to bed, but no, I'll talk the MCU. I mean, it's a very interesting place where the MCU is at. I did feel that Thor: Love and Thunder was a big misstep.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet, I'll confess, but I will see it this week.
I felt it was, in terms of its humor, it was unbalanced.
Okay.
I just felt it was really, really unbalanced, and you'll see why. And it was just a straight up goofy comedy that I think undermined what the Thor character actually is.
Okay. Well, and again, based on Ragnarok, I understand where they're leaning in that direction. And I love what Jason Aaron did with the original stories, both of Jane Foster and the God Killer. And I need to see it sooner than later so I can have Jason back. And I'm sure he'll, put a bright face on it because he's still part of the company and everything. But I'm curious. Hey, thanks for making me aware of Eric July on your show.
Oh.
Yeah. And
you should talk to... Lael Rockwell. You should talk to Eric July.
No, I'd like to, and it's the first time, because listen, I have no problem with people's politics, and I don't consider Eric to be part of the Comicsgate problem, whatever. But I have no problem with anybody going out and making their own universe and making their own comics. That's wonderful, and I talk to people like that all the time, even ones that, because of their success, DC and Marvel come calling. They're like, no, thanks. I'm doing fine on my own. And that's great. But I would, so I don't lump Eric with those other people. But that's my only caveat is, as long as you don't hate, I'm fine with, I would love to hear your point of view. I would love to discuss it. And sadly, there are people in Comicsgate that used to be friends that, frankly, I'm just like, I'm really disappointed, because now they kind of do hate. And it's one thing to make your own stuff. It's another thing to go, well, I don't like that creator because of what they do. And I've seen people be kind of cruel with their dislike of what is happening at Marvel and DC. I think Eric is an honest critic, and that's fine. That's okay. But I don't see evidence of hate.
Right.
So, But I wasn't aware. I'll be honest. I wasn't on my radar. Wasn't watching Fox. Maybe I wasn't reading Bleedy Cool in the last couple of weeks to know that he was as successful as he's been. Holy shit, he's made $2.5 million.
I mean, how freaking crazy is that?
That's awesome. That's great.
He has this thing ready to go. Apparently the comic is done and he's got it ready to go. And
he's working with Cliff Richard. He's working with Will Conrad. They're great comic book artists. I'm a big Will Conrad fan. I love his stuff and always have. And even had the chance to briefly have him on one of my shows. So, All right, buddy, I see you yawning, so I'm going to let you go.
I don't mean to yawn. It's not that I'm not loving the conversation. I am.
It's okay. You've had a long day. You came from a great play. I really appreciate you coming on, because, as you know, I've been chomping at the bit to talk to you for weeks. So I thank you, as always, for coming back. And it's always fun talking to you, man. So Starship SmackDown, Sunday of San Diego Comic-Con.
Yes.
And I understand it's good versus evil ships, good ships versus evil ships. I heard Altman say that.
Which will be interesting to see how that goes.
So it's you, Altman. Who else is on the panel?
I think Ashley, Darren Doctorman, and I don't think Kay is going to be there. I'm not sure who's next, to be honest.
Okay. Well, they're always entertaining. I hope someone's going to be. I hope at least either Trek Spurts is going to present the audio, or I hope someone's running video.
Oh yeah, I think somebody. Well, though they don't. Comic-Con doesn't want you to film your panels.
I know.
Which is such a weird, like, these panels. I mean, I get it because it's Comic-Con, but still,
right?
It seems silly if you have good panels to not, record them. Or
if you don't know, there's a guy named Jamie Covell who has a website called The Comic Books, and he always records MP3s of panels. He's been doing it for at least the last 15 years.
Right.
And it is so great. And I always give it up to him and say, thank God you were out there capturing these wonderful panels. And I mean, again, not just sci-fi TV and film, but really some of the great comic book stuff. Christ, I remember when Arnold Drake interviewed Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And it was such a lovely conversation. It was literally Arnold's last Comic-Con. And I'm really glad they had that conversation. Or when Russ Heath was interviewed by Mark Waid a couple of years ago. I was at that panel. And and I started to say earlier, I love the academic panels that they do at Comic-Con because I learned so much and really end up getting guests from that because I'm always interested in those university published, kind of doctrine essays or whatever, books that these comic book or I should say pop culture archivists are finding, and I'm learning about things about comics I never knew before. It's fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, have a great time at San Diego, man. And
all right.
And I'm gonna wrap up the broadcast. Everybody, hey, great questions, great conversation. I hope you'll hit the like button. I hope you'll subscribe to Word Balloon. And I always love when Rob's people come over and check out Word Balloon. It means a lot. And I always appreciate your publicity for your video, what you do on Robservations and your other YouTube stuff. Real fast, you're on Spreaker. Tell everybody your audio podcast that you just
we've got the audio. You can find Robservations. You can find Let's Get Physical Media. You can find Whining About Movies. All the podcasts are on Spreaker, wherever you get your podcasts. So you can find them everywhere from Apple to Spotify, everywhere.
Excellent.
So
man.
They are everywhere. And which is great. And then, of course, I did Robservations is back, and I'm on the John Campea show. So you can find me wherever. And if you want to write me letters, you can go to postgeeksingularity.com, or you can go to Instagram at RM Burnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM.
Absolutely, man. Well done, sir. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Tomorrow night, I'm talking to Ron Mars about a comic book he did over at Aftershock. And I look forward to that. And it's going to be a fun week. And I'll see everybody. I won't be at San Diego, but I'll see everybody the next weekend at Terrificon in Mohegan Sun in Connecticut.